Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching this week. And before I get started, I do like to go over some news and announcements I just found out about, and I do got a couple here for you. The first is that there is going to be a brand new expansion coming to the game Fractured Sky, which is a game that was previously released by IV Games. And if you're not familiar with this game, this is a competitive game where players are going to be trying to collect these different resources that are going to be showing up randomly across different areas of the board. But each player is going to have a bunch of different ships with a hidden number underneath each of them. Where those resources actually appear each round is predetermined because you're going to be drawing a bunch of cards at the start of the game, but they're all going to be face down, and players are going to have to use their abilities in order to try and peek at them. And then once you do have some knowledge, you can try to throw the other players off by putting your less influential ships in the regions that might not have a resource. Of course, there's a lot more to it than that, and this new expansion is going to be adding a bunch of new mechanisms as well, so if you do want to learn more about this game and the new expansion, make sure to subscribe down below because I will be covering this in a couple weeks here because this one is launching on April 30th. We also have the next game announced from CMON, and this one's going to be God of War the board game. And when I originally added this to my notes, it didn't actually have a counter there, so it looks like this one's actually launching this week, so I'll come back to this in a few minutes. If you want to find more content like this, definitely go ahead and check out BoardGameCo because him and I do work together keeping track of all these upcoming campaigns, and he puts out a whole whack of other content, including a video at the start of the month going over all the heavy hitters for that month. I do also want to make a special mention to Grant LYON and his channel because he does content very similar to mine, but he focuses on the retail games. So if you're tired of spending a ton of money for expensive Kickstarters that you don't even see for 2 or 3 years, you definitely want to check out his channel because he can find you better prices with awesome games that you could get right now. He's also dangerously close to 10,000 subscribers right now, so if you do like his content, make sure to give him a subscribe as well, and we can help tip him over the edge there. He's also going to put out a special video once he actually hits that milestone, and he is a bit of a comedian, so you'll definitely want to check that out. And there might be a few familiar faces too. But I'll have links to all those channels in the description below, but we got lots of games to cover this week, so let's check them out. And the first campaign we have launches on April 14th, and this one's called Cheesar's Arena, and this plays 2 to 6 players and takes about 15 to 30 minutes to play. And this one is a fairly simple competitive game where players are going to be rolling a pool of dice and then drafting those dice in order to take various actions. There's going to be a bunch of different colored dice, with the yellow ones representing cheese, and you're going to want to be trying to collect those in order to gain victory points. And the first person to collect 7 of those is going to be the one to win the game. But each player is going to have their own mouse starting on one of the opposing corners of the board, and there's also going to be a cat located in the middle. Players can draft the green die in order to move their mouse in a straight direction up to the number of pips on that die, or instead players can draft the red die in order to move the cat. And the reason that you want to move the cat is that you can actually use the cat in order to kick cheese off the board. So that was my power going out, but it looks like we're back in business here, and what I was trying to say is that you want to move the cat because you can actually kick cheese dice off the board if you think you won't be able to get it with your mouse, and you want to prevent other players from getting it. The nice thing about any time a cheese is collected by a player's mouse, or if it's kicked off the board, is that it goes back into the pool and will be re-rolled on the next round, and then the number of pips that you roll on the cheese die indicate the number of spaces away the cheese needs to be placed away from the cat, and it's the player that is rolling the dice for that round that gets to decide. One last thing to know about movement in this game is that when you are moving your mouse, if you're moving adjacent to the cat or an opponent piece, then it does cost an extra point in order to make that movement. But the game continues like this until a single player is able to collect 7 cheese dice, and then that player wins the game. And if you want to learn more about this one, I will have it linked down in the description below. And launch on the 15th, we have Molehill Meadows, and this plays any number of players and takes about 20 to 30 minutes to play. And anytime that you see a ridiculous player count like this, it usually means that it's rolling right, and that is the case with this game because each player is going to have their own pad of paper, which is going to represent the meadow where they're going to be moving their mole around. And in order to do that, they're going to be using polyomino shapes, with each round revealing a new card that all the players need to use in order to move their mole. The way this works is that each player is going to be drawing that shape onto their piece of paper with just one side of the polyomino touching their existing network of shapes. Players are also not allowed to cross over any shapes that they previously drew, so you're going to want to plan ahead and make sure that you're creating a route that won't lock you into a corner. But of course, players are doing this to try and gain the most victory points at the end of the game. There's a bunch of different objectives that players are going to be going for. First of all, you're going to be trying to collect various treasure, which you're going to be checking off on your player sheet. But then there's also special scoring cards, and there's going to be a couple of those drawn for each game that are going to have various different objectives that players can try to achieve in order to score more victory points. For example, with this one, you're going to be gaining a victory point with every flower that you move through, and then also an additional 7 victory points if you're able to cover all of them on your sheet. Not only that, but players can also collect worms, which they can spend on these different tracks here in order to gain a one-time use ability once that track is completely full. And then there's also different patterns like flowers or ants or rivers that will appear on the edges of the board, and if you're able to create a tunnel between the two matching patterns, then that's also going to be gaining you victory points at the end of the game. But of course, there will be some hazards out on your sheet as well that you're going to want to avoid, because there's going to be rocks out on your sheet that are going to be blocking different areas, preventing you from being able to draw shapes through those. And then there's also molehills that if you do end up drawing over those, then they're going to be a minus point at the end of the game. And like I said already, you're not allowed to draw polyominoes through shapes that you already drew. But the game continues like this, with a new polyomino shape being drawn each round, and then every player using that to try and fill in their sheets. The player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game, and if you do want to check this one out in more detail, I will have it linked in the description down below. And launching on April 16th, we have Castle Up, and this one looks like a really fun tableau builder where players are all going to be starting out with their own castle card, and then players are going to be trying to gain more buildings throughout the game, adding them to their tableau and building up their kingdom in order to gain new actions for each building that they're able to build. At the start of each round, the market's going to be refreshed with new buildings for players to potentially purchase, with those buildings being drawn from the building deck, which is actually ordered into several eras, with the later eras having more powerful buildings. The cool thing about building buildings is that if you have the resources to be able to purchase them, you can just go ahead and put them into your tableau. But if you already have a building in your tableau, you can actually trade them in to cash them in for those resources and pay for that new building. This of course means that you do lose your existing building, but it's just a nice option to have. And buildings can have all sorts of different effects, like allowing you to defend your kingdom or earn different resources, or even have ongoing or passive effects that players can take advantage of. Then there's also actions on cards that can only be used once per round. Of course, there are some cards that do grant you with victory points or different requirements in order to earn victory points. And finally, there's cards that do allow you with strength in order to attack your opponents, because whenever you attack an opponent in this game, you're not actually attacking them. Instead, you're going to be attacking their buildings, because on the left-hand side of each building card, there's going to be an amount of strength that that building has. And if you're able to accumulate enough attack power from the cards in your tableau to get a value that's higher than your opponent's building's strength, then you can actually attack that building. And if they're not able to defend against it using any of their defense cards, which essentially will cause them to use that card early, making it unavailable in their next turn. And these cards usually do have multiple actions, which means that if you use this card for defense out of turn, then you won't be able to get those other benefits when it is your turn. But as I was saying, if they're not able to defend against it, then they're going to be flipping the attacked card over to its gray side, which essentially loses all its abilities, and they're not going to be able to make use of that building until they're able to fix it, which they'll have to do by spending the amount of resources in the top right corner. But when a card is flipped over to its damaged side, it still will have a strength value on it, and if it gets attacked again, then the card actually gets discarded from your tableau, and you're no longer able to salvage anything from that card. But like I said, there's a bunch of different cards offered in this game, and since you're only going to be purchasing a few of them, and also the ones that don't get purchased are going to be completely washed each and every round, that means that players are only going to be experiencing a small subset of cards each time they play this game, which is going to make each game feel very different than the last. Each card in your tableau does count as a single action, which means that when you do use that card, you're going to be tapping it to indicate that it has been already used. But of course, you are allowed to resolve these in any order, and also the more cards that you get in your tableau, the more actions that you'll have on your turn. Players are also limited to purchasing just one building on their turn, but when they do purchase a building, that does go into their tableau built and ready to use, so you're also able to use it on the turn that you purchased it. But if you're not able to purchase a building, you do have one other option here, and that's to use these different action cards. And these are completely free in order to take from the shared market. But of course, these are one-time use, and they're going to be going back into the market after you use them, unlike your buildings that you get to keep for the rest of the game. So you probably just want to be taking this action when it's absolutely necessary. But the game continues like this until all the building cards run out, and then at that point you determine which player has the most victory points, and then that player wins the game. If you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked in the description below, and of course you can click to get notified. And also launching on the 16th, we have Hispania, and this plays 1 to 3 players. It takes about 30 to 60 minutes to play. And this one is a cooperative game where players are acting as generals of Rome, trying to lead a conquest to take Hispania into the Roman Empire. And the way this game works is that there's going to be 3 different generals that players are going to be controlling, and then taking actions by spending denarii, which players will be earning each turn. And there is several difficulties offered in this game, so if you want to have a easier or more difficult experience, that's going to adjust the amount of denarii you get and a few other aspects of the game. Between each player's turn, the people of Hispania are also going to be putting up some resistance against the players, and the way that this works is that you're going to be rolling some dice, and this is going to determine the city where a revolt's going to occur. If that city is not already controlled by the players, then you're going to be putting a revolt token there that players are going to have to extinguish later. But if there is already a revolt token there, then you're going to be putting a Hispanic army token. If players ever have to put one of these tokens out on the board and there's none left in the supply, then that is one of the lost conditions of the game. And also for each round, you're going to be taking one of those tokens and then marking it on the round tracker, which means that there's going to be less and less of these tokens as the game goes on, making it more difficult to succeed. But as I said, players are going to be spending denarii on their turn in order to take various actions, and one of those actions is to move their general. And whenever you do that, you're going to be moving to one adjacent space. But something that I really do like about this action is that players can also use a different action in order to construct roads between different locations. And anytime that you do this and create a connection of roads between various cities, you can actually move through an entire connection of roads with one single movement. So being strategic with this can actually save you quite a lot of denarii if you're putting your roads in the right locations. Players can also spend denarii in order to get rid of a revolt token, and they can also spend a denarii in order to build a garrison in a location if there's no revolt in that location. And outside of that, there's no limit on which cities you can build a garrison in, but in order to win the game, you need to build a garrison in each of the province capitals. And things get a little more dicey when you're not only dealing with a revolt, but also with Hispanic forces at that revolt. And in order to get rid of an enemy army token, players actually have to go into battle with that army. And the way that this works is that you're actually going to be rolling dice, and this is going to determine the strength between the opposing forces, but players can of course spend extra denarii in order to increase their force. And also for each garrison that you have adjacent to you when you do go into battle, that will also be adding to your overall strength, so it is in your interest to build the garrisons even outside of trying to complete the end game objective of building them in all the capitals. But the game continues like this, alternating between a player's turn and the Hispanic resistance, and if the players are able to claim all those capitals before either the end of the game or before they run out of revolt tokens and they win the game, otherwise the players lose. And if you do want to learn more about this one, I will have it linked in the description down below, and of course you can click to get notified. And also on the 16th, we have a relaunch and reprint of Mini Rogue, as well as a few new expansions. And this is a game that plays 1 to 2 players originally, but this new expansion is going to be allowing you to play with 3 players cooperatively, or with 4 players with one of the players acting as the overlord for the dungeon, creating a 1 versus many scenario. But essentially, this is a game where each player plays as a hero with their own player board that they're going to be using to track various aspects of their hero. This, of course, is going to be their health as well as their experience points, which will earn them more dice the more experience that they have, and their armor, which helps them negate damage, and of course food, which they're going to have to spend as they move through the different levels of the dungeon, because this is a game that actually takes you through 4 different levels, and each time that you progress to a new level of the dungeon, you're going to have to spend a certain amount of food. But if they're not able to do that, then they're going to lose some amount of health. But players will also be able to earn gold through the various rooms in the dungeon that they travel through, and some of these rooms might also have opportunities to spend that gold for different items or potions. And these have a variety of effects, but most of this game is done through dice rolling, so a lot of the effects will have to do with dice mitigation and re-rolling any of your dice that you're not so happy with. But the way this game works is that players are going to be moving through the various levels of the dungeon, with each level being represented by 9 different cards in a 3x3 grid. The first card's always going to be flipped over, and that's where players are going to be starting, but then the very last card on the bottom right is always going to be a boss card. And there might be other enemies that you encounter through the dungeon as you move through it, but players essentially are going to be flipping any 2 cards adjacent and then choosing one to move into. When you move into that location, it usually requires you to roll your hero dice as well as the dungeon dice, die, and the dungeon die is going to determine what portion of the card activates, because there can be a bunch of different potential outcomes for each of the given cards, and this is something that you're going to want to consider when deciding which cards you want to move into. But then your hero dice are going to determine the amount of successes that you have at that location. This means that the more hero dice you get, the higher likelihood you do have to succeed, but if you do have some items or gear to help, that is always nice. Of course, fighting the different enemies does come at a risk because you can lose health, but the positive benefit there is that you can get different items and gear from fighting them, and of course they will gain you XP as well, which, like I said, does get you more dice. But the game essentially continues like this, with players moving through the various cards until they reach the boss for that specific level of the dungeon, and then once that boss is defeated, then you're going to be laying out 9 different cards for the next level of the dungeon. Once players do this enough times and survive their way through the dungeon and make it to that final boss, they win the game if they are able to actually beat that final boss with all the different gear and XP and items that they're able to gain up to that point. If not, then of course they lose the game, and this new expansion is going to be adding a bunch of new variety into the game with new enemies and new cards and new dungeon setups that you can experience. And like I said, this does also allow you to play with up to 4 players, and there will be new characters that you can play as well. And there's also going to be a new mechanism that allows you to adjust the difficulty if you want to make things a little bit easier or a little more difficult. And if you want to check it out, I will have it linked in the description down below. Also launching on the 16th, we have the Castles of Burgundy Special Edition, which plays 1 to 4 players. It takes about 70 to 120 minutes to play, and this one's a really interesting campaign for a few reasons. First off, this is a fantastic game. It's one of the best games ever made in my opinion, and for that reason, this one is my own personal pick of the week. And also, something interesting about this campaign is that I don't actually think there's anything new offered in this campaign, because this is a game that was offered previously, and usually with crowdfunding, when they do bring a game back, they usually need to add something new. But I guess since this is an Awakened Realms game and Gamefound is owned by Awakened Realms, then they can kind of do whatever they want. But it doesn't look like they're adding anything new to the game, and I'm not too upset with that because this is already a game that has a ton of expansions, a ton of content. Don't get me wrong, I want and own most of it, and I'll come back to that in a minute here. And if there was new content, I would probably be thinking pretty hard about getting that as well, because this is a game that's never leaving my collection. But if I'm being real here, this is a game that has more than enough just with its base content, and it's an amazing game just with that. But of course, with this being a game produced by Awakened Realms, there's going to be a ton of extra content and miniatures and deluxifications that you can add onto your pledge. And I don't recommend all of these, and I'll come back to that at the end of my coverage for this game. But there's some really nice improvements here that I think this game does deserve. But if you're not familiar with how the original game plays, this is a game where each player is going to be starting the game with their own personal player board, and on your board you're going to be having this section in the middle that's going to outline different requirements for placing tiles out on that board. And there's a whole stack of these sheets that you can swap in and out of your board that makes the possibilities of this game almost endless. And if you want to play a game where everyone's using the same sheets in their board, you can do that, but there's also no problem with players having different sheets as well if you do want a bit of asymmetry. But the main board's broken into a few different areas, and each round you're going to be semi-randomly assigning tiles to each of those locations. And the reason I say it's semi-randomly is that you are drawing the tiles randomly from a bag, but each colored tile is going to have their own colored bag that it's associated with. And you're going to be drawing one of each color of a set of colors for each of those locations. The rules for this one are pretty simple. The game just plays over 5 different rounds, and each round players are going to have their own dice that they're going to be rolling in order to determine the actions that they have available to them, because you're going to be spending a die for each of your actions, and the different options that you have are to spend a die matching the value of one of the different locations out on the main board in order to draft a tile from that location. And when you draft a tile, it's going to be going into this reserve here in the bottom section of your board, and you can only hold 3 tiles at once. This is where your other option comes into play, because you can also spend a die in order to place one of the tiles in your reserve onto one of the locations on your board. And there are a few restrictions here. First of all, you always have to play a tile next to a tile that's already in play. And then also you have to place a tile on a location that matches its color. And also that location has to have the value of the die that you spent in order to do it. The nice thing about this is that there is some flexibility with the value of your dice anytime that you spend a die, because you can also spend worker tokens in order to modify that value up or down. And there's different ways to get those worker tokens throughout the game, but the most common way is the third action option, and that's just to spend a die in order to take 2 worker tokens. There is just one more action you could perform by spending a die rather than the other 3 options, and that's to spend a die to sell a stack of goods that matches the value of that die. Players can also only hold 3 different stacks of goods, but if you're getting the same type of good, you can add them to a stack that you already have. And the way that you get goods in this game is that there's going to be a neutral die that the first player is going to be rolling every round, and then whatever location that die indicates, that location is going to be getting a goods tile. These are going to be accumulating in the different locations as the game goes on, and anytime that you place one of the ship tiles on your board, that's going to allow you to take the goods from any one location and add them to your player board. When you do spend a die to sell these goods, you're going to be choosing just one stack to sell, so you do want it to be as large as possible because it's always going to be gaining you a coin, but then it's going to be earning you victory points equal to the number of goods in that stack, and then you'll just be discarding those back into the supply. And those are all the actions you can perform by spending your dice, but there is one more action that you can take on your turn if you can afford to do it, and that's to spend 2 coins in order to take any of the tiles located in the center of the board. And these tiles are kind of special because they do come from their own bag, just like each of the other colors. But what's special about these ones is that the face upside of that tile can be any color. So although these are their own unique set of tiles, any combination of colors can show up here, giving a lot of flexibility and options to the players that can afford them. I'm just going to go through each of the different types of tiles here so you can understand how they differ from each other, because the first ones are the castle tiles, and anytime that you get to place one of these out on your board, they essentially act like a free action as if you had an extra die of any value that you wanted. This means that you can use that action to perform any of the different actions that you could perform with a die, and you also get to choose that value. Lots of flexibility here, and that's what makes the castles so special. But then we also have the beige tiles, which when you place them out on your board, they're going to give you a one-time ability that you'll be able to take advantage of. And then also we do have the different animal tiles, and whenever you're placing these out, they're going to be earning you victory points equal to the number of animals on that tile. But anytime that you connect these tiles to another tile or set of tiles that share the same animal, you not only get to score the points on that tile, but also all the animals on the tiles that are connected to it. So this is a great way to try and get a ton of points if you're able to create large pastures of all the same animals. The yellow tiles also do give you special abilities, but these ones are more ongoing abilities that you'll be able to take advantage of throughout the entirety of the game, or they might also be different scoring opportunities that you'll be able to take advantage of at the end of the game. These gray mine tiles are pretty nice because they do gain you a coin for every round. And other than that, coins are pretty difficult to get in this game, and like I said, you can use those coins to purchase those special tiles in the center of the board. And then we have the boats, which I did already explain. They do move you up the player order track, and player order is really important in this game because there's going to be tiles that you really want to get, and if you have first dibs on the board, you can at least guarantee that you are going to be getting one of those. But other than that, the boats do also allow you to take goods from the main board and then add them onto your own personal board. And I did already mention a couple ways that you can gain victory points in this game, either by selling those good tiles or by gaining those yellow tiles that offer some sort of scoring opportunities at the end of the game. But one of the main ways of scoring victory points in this game is by completing the different regions on your board, because anytime that you complete a region, you're going to be cashing in a number of victory points depending on the size of that region, and also depending on how early you completed it in the game. Not only that, but if you're able to complete all of a particular color on your board, you're also going to be gaining victory points for that, but whoever does this first is going to be getting the most victory points. Players also gain victory points for any coins, workers, or unsold goods at the end of the game, but then after all of that is tallied up, the player with the most victory points wins the game. And I did mention that this is one of my favorite games of all time, and normally when that's the case, I'm pretty much willing to buy everything for that game. But I did also mention that I didn't buy everything, and there is a reason for that, and I'll just go ahead and let you know what I did buy and what I didn't. And I guess the easier way to tell you what I bought is to tell you what I didn't buy, because it's really just one thing, and that is the miniatures box for this game. And the reason that I don't recommend buying this is, well, it is a lot of extra money and it is a lot of extra content to store. But on top of all of that, this is also an upgrade that just makes the game more fiddly, because this is a game where you're drawing tiles from a bag and you're not really able to draw miniatures from a bag. So if you do want to incorporate these miniatures into your game, that means you either have to have the cardboard tiles or the acrylic tiles anyway, and then draw those out of the bag, and then once you draw that tile, you essentially discard it somewhere, and then take the appropriate miniature that represents that tile. So it's just adding a few extra steps here, and these miniatures do look really cool, and if you think that's worth the extra headache of owning them and going through that extra motion anytime that you draw a tile, sure, go ahead and buy them, but for me, I don't think it's worth it, and those acrylic tiles are already really, really nice, and they don't add any additional fiddliness to the game, and they just work seamlessly with how the game was originally designed. The cool thing about this is that the miniatures for the castles actually come with the core game, so even if you don't get the miniatures expansion, you will have the miniatures for the castles, and I really like that because each player can just keep their castle miniatures with them, and when they get that castle tile, they can just take one of the miniatures that they have next to them and put them into play. Players can only have a maximum of 4 castles on the board, so keeping those 4 castles next to you isn't a whole lot of extra fiddliness to add to the game, and I think it is fun to make the castles stand out a little bit since they are a centerpiece of the game, and it's literally in the name. Other than the additional miniatures, I pretty much recommend everything else offered in this campaign, but if you did want to save a little bit more money, I would probably drop the playmat because playmats are really just useful for when you have cards to pick up off of a table because it makes picking them up a little bit easier. But this game doesn't have any cards, so you don't have to worry about that. But honestly, if you just want to purchase the core game, I think that's a really great way to go about it because the expansions don't really make this game what it is. Everything that you need to play this game is offered in the core game. It's an excellent game as is, and it completely stands on its own. But no matter how you play this game, it's going to be an awesome experience no matter what because it's just such a great design. And if you do want to check it out, I will have a link down below. And of course, you can follow along to get notified. And like I said, I don't think there is anything new offered in this campaign, but I'm just going to follow along with it and check it out just in case. They did say in the comment section that they're not going to be adding any new stretch goals. But things do change, so if this is a game that you're super interested in, you want to make sure you have everything, I probably would check it out once at least before it ends. Also launching on the 16th, we have REDLINE, the tactical card combat game, and this plays 2 players and takes just 25 to 45 minutes to play. And this one takes everything from those large tactical war games and distills it all into a small package and allows players to just jump into it using only cards. This is a campaign that I thought was launching a couple weeks ago, but it got pushed back until now, so I did already offer coverage for this one, so I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. What's really neat about this one is that the battlefield's represented by these 5 different mission cards, and players are going to be fighting over these throughout the entirety of the game, because once a player is able to gain control of all 5 of them, then they're going to be the one to win the game. Players are each going to have their own deck of cards made up of various factions, each with different abilities and strengths and weaknesses, and then players are going to be drawing from that deck of cards and then deciding which ones they want to deploy. But what's neat about this game is that for each of the cards that you deploy, you're going to be assigning a dial to them in secret, setting the dial to a certain setting, and then revealing it simultaneously. Depending on how you set the dial, that's going to allow you to bring other cards into play in various ways. This could allow you to bring in cards to focus more power on a single mission, or even attack missions that are adjacent to where you place your card, or even attack your player's hand directly. This new expansion is going to be adding a bunch of new cards that can just be mixed into the game. This means that there's a bunch of new mission cards that you'll be able to add into the game, but the big addition here is with the 2 brand new factions that are going to be introducing some brand new abilities and mechanisms that weren't in the game previously. The first faction is going to allow you to debuff enemy units and collect bounties, while the other one is going to allow you to mine valuable ore at different mission cards that you can later spend to unlock new options and strategies further in the game. I'm always keeping my eye out for fun 2-player games, and with the positive reception that this one's been getting, I'm really interested in it. It does look like a lot of fun, so if this one does look interesting to you as well, you can go ahead and check it out. I'll have it linked in the description below. Also launching on the 16th, we have Mindbug Battlefruits, and this plays in about 10 to 20 minutes, and this is a game that plays 2 or 4 players because this new version of the game is actually going to offer team modes. And if you're not familiar with Mindbug, this is a system that does exist already, and it's a system that I'm a huge fan of, and Mindbug Battlefruits is its own standalone addition to this series. And I've played quite a lot of games of Mindbug, and I've played quite a few versions in the series, and this is a game that I'm a huge fan of, and I really do think this one is a masterpiece in its design because I really don't have anything bad to say about this one, and I only have positive things to say. I'm not saying this game's better than games like Castles of Burgundy or even other games in its genre, but I would say that this game is quite a lot better than a lot of other games in its genre. This is the most streamlined card battler that I've ever played, and I think it also offers the best depth to complexity because there is a ton of variety in this game and a ton of good decisions, and it's all offered with just a single deck of cards, which makes this super affordable, which is just a nice bonus. And for those reasons, this one is also my own personal pick of the week. And I do own the original version of Mindbug, but the publisher was nice enough to send me this newer version of the game, so I'll just go ahead and explain how the game works by just showing you how to play through a round. And the way that you set up is that you're going to be taking 2 Mindbug cards, and then you're going to be giving 2 Mindbug cards to your opponent. I'll come back to how these work in a second here, but these are a huge aspect of the game, and you really want to think about when you use these cards and make sure that you're using them at the best point possible. But something that I love about this game is that you have a whole deck of different types of cards here, but in a given game, you're only going to be dealing 10 cards to yourself, and then 10 cards to your opponent. And if you ever can't play any cards on your turn, meaning that you don't have any left in your hand, and also there's none in your tableau to activate, then you instantly lose the game. But you can also lose the game if you ever take 3 hit points. And the recommended way to track health in this game is just to take 3 cards from the unused cards from the box, and then just put them out in front of each player. And there's no limit to the amount of health you can have in this game, because you can also get cards that add more cards into your health. And I'll just give you a quick look at the cards in my hand, and you'll notice that they all have a different strength amount located in the top left corner of the card, but they can also have different keywords, like for example this one's fast and tough, but there are other cards that have other keywords or even different effects that activate based on certain triggers. For example, this one says it activates an ability when I go to play it into my tableau. This is a game that plays over a series of alternating turns, where on your turn you can perform one of 2 possible actions. You can either play a card into your tableau, or instead you can activate a card in your tableau. But like I said, there are different abilities and keywords that can modify this and break the rules in different ways. For example, if I was to go first, I would probably go ahead and play this card, because not only does it have a high strength of 8, but it's also fast, which allows me to put it into my tableau and then also activate it in the same turn. This means that I can put it into my tableau and then I can choose to attack my opponent. The other nice thing about doing this is that when I attack my opponent, I also gain 1 life. So if I were to go ahead with that, my opponent would have the opportunity to block with any of the cards that they have in their tableau, but since they haven't had the chance to put any cards out yet, the only option is for them to take a damage, which would cost them 1 of their health, and then I would also gain a health because of the ability of the card. But anytime it is not your turn, you have the opportunity to use your Mindbug. So for example, if I went to go play this card, my opponent could say, whoa, 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 stop right there. I'm going to be playing my Mindbug card. And whenever they do that, they basically spend this card to play this card for themselves. And you're not allowed to use a Mindbug on a Mindbug, so there's nothing I can do about this. But now this card is going to be played as if my opponent played it, which means that instead of me getting the benefits here, my opponent is, and they're going to be gaining that health, and I'm going to be losing 1. And you can already see how there's a lot of depth here in deciding which cards you want to play when, because it probably would have been better for me to just hang on to this card and then play it later in the game when both of their Mindbugs have already been used. But because I got Mindbugged, I get to go again, and maybe I want to play this card here, which is fast and tough and also has a strength of 8. And let's just say my opponent didn't want to use up all their Mindbugs so early in the game, so they let me go ahead and play this card, and because it is fast, I get to activate this one immediately as well, and I'm going to activate it in order to attack my opponent. And what's really cool about this game is that my opponent gets to decide if they want to block that attack, or if they just want to take the damage. If they choose to block the attack, they're going to be choosing 1 card in their tableau in order to do that. When this happens, you just compare the strength of the 2 cards and then discard the one that's lower, and then take into consideration any keywords or special abilities. But because these 2 cards have the same strength, if my opponent chose to block with this card, then both of our cards would take a damage, and every card in this game just has 1 health, unless it has the keyword tough, which this one does, and in that case you're going to be tapping it, indicated that it's taken 1 damage, but the other card would be removed from the game. Then that's the end of my turn, and then it would be my opponent's turn to either play a card or activate a card in their tableau, and since they don't have any cards in play, they're just going to go ahead and play one of their cards into their tableau. And this one says that it has keywords Frenzy and Tough, and I'll explain all the keywords in a second here. But this one also happens to have a play ability that says they can lose a life, and if they do, they can put any card from any player's discard pile into play. Well, that's really nice for them because they just lost a pretty powerful card that they can now just put right back into play, and since that has the fast ability, well, you can already see all these different chaining effects and depth that this game has to offer. There's a bunch of different keywords, and I'll just explain all of them, even the ones that I've already mentioned, but fast basically lets you play a card and then activate it in the same turn. Frenzy lets you attack twice if you're able to attack with that card. Hunter allows the attacker to choose which card they want to attack. Poisonous always defeats their opponent whether or not their strength is higher or lower than them. Cards with the keyword sneaky can only be blocked with other cards that are also sneaky, so this is really nice if you want to try and attack your opponent and not allow them to block you. And then the tough cards have 2 health, and like I said, when they take a damage, you just tilt them sideways to indicate that they only have 1 health left. And as you saw, the creatures can have all sorts of different abilities, and some of them can be triggered when you play the card, attack with the card, or when that card is defeated. But the big change here that makes this version of the game different than the previous versions of Mindbug is the addition of this little icon here with the orange crystals. And this one has a number 2 inside of it, which means that when I play this card, I'm going to be putting these 2 tokens onto the card. And then that essentially acts as a timer with one of those coming off on each of my following turns until the last one is removed, and then the ability on that card would be activated, which in this case would cost my opponent 1 life. That's pretty much all you need to know to play Mindbug Battlefruits, and like I said, I think this is a fantastic game. I think it does quite a lot with only just a little, and it has very few components to it. You don't have to fiddle around with different health markers, other than these new crystal tokens, which really aren't all that much, and if you don't want to play with those, you could always get the original Mindbug. This is a game that I highly recommend, and if you do like games like Keyforge, I personally do enjoy this game more than I enjoy Keyforge, and I think Keyforge is excellent. But Keyforge I do have complaints about because, for one, the games can technically just go on forever, and I have had really long games of Keyforge just because we keep undoing what the other player does. Whereas in this game, you're never going to have that problem, and I've never had any other problems either. But I only showed you one of the sets here for the Mindbug Battlefruits, but there's also going to be the Galaxy set, which is going to offer its own unique twist on the game. So if you do want to check that out, you will want to check out the link to the campaign in the description below. Something that's really cool and fun about following the campaign is that they are offering a foiled version of each of the Mindbug cards, and if you follow along with the campaign, you'll get those added to your pledge completely for free. Awesome game here, and if you do want to lock in those foiled cards, I do have it linked down below, and you can follow along to make sure that you get those. And the next campaign we have is also launching on the 16th, and this one is also a very special one because this is for the 2025 Board Game Mosaic calendar. And if you've watched my videos enough, then you may have noticed at the end of each video, I do have a little bit of an Easter egg there where I unveil an art piece built entirely out of components from board games. Well, a fun fact here is that all of those were created by Katja Houtson, which is the creator for this campaign. She's going to be offering that artwork in a few different forms, with the main one being these calendars. And what I really like about these calendars is not only does it feature the board game artwork, but it also has a section here where you can mark down the different games that you've played that month. And there's also a 10x10 or a 20x5 challenge if you're interested in trying to just get more games to the table. So this is a great addition to your game room if you want to set up a game schedule and then also keep track of all the different games that you're playing. Her previous campaigns have also offered the artwork in other forms as well, like on pins or stickers or mugs, and I'm sure there's going to be some other options as well in this campaign. If you like the work that she's doing here, definitely go ahead and follow along with the campaign, and I'm sure she would love your support. And if you do want to see the different types of artwork that she's done in the past, well, you can go ahead and watch every single one of my videos up to this point and skip to the end of the video. Actually, just watch the entire thing, or I guess you could just go over to her Instagram. But either way, be sure to check out her campaign, and if you think it'll help you play more games, be sure to grab one of those calendars. Also on the 16th, we have Wedding Countdown, which plays 2 to 7 players and takes just 5 to 15 minutes to play. And this one is a competitive game where players are each going to be dealt 9 cards that they're going to be putting face down in front of them in a 3x3 grid. Each player starts the game by flipping any 2 corner cards, but the whole goal here is to try and get as many pairs of cards side by side in your grid, because those are going to be canceling out at the end of the game, with any of the remaining cards having their values added up and contributing to your end game score. The goal of the game is to have the lowest score at the end of the game, so you want to get rid of as many cards as you can, and then any cards that you have remaining, you want them to be as low a value as possible. The way that you do all this is that on your turn you get to draw a card from the draw deck, and then you get to decide if you want to keep that card by replacing one of the cards in your tableau. And it doesn't matter if the card you're replacing is face up or face down, you can swap the card with any card in your tableau, but the other option is to instead discard that card in order to reveal one of the other cards in your tableau. Some of the cards might have different abilities on them that when they're placed or revealed, you'll be able to peek at other cards or swap other cards to different locations in your tableau. The game continues like this until a single player has all of their cards revealed in their tableau, and then you're going to be finishing that round and then tallying up each player's score, and the player with the lowest score wins the game. And if you want to check this one out, I will have it linked in the description down below. Also launching on the 16th, we have Knight and Avalon RPG, and I don't normally get into as much detail with the RPGs, so if you are interested in this one, you'll have to check out the campaign for yourself, but I will have it linked down below. But what does make this one really interesting is that it is built upon Arthurian legend, and it's inspired by Arthurian legend, but it takes it to brand new territory with crazy abominations, a futuristic setting, as well as all sorts of sci-fi gear that you'll be able to equip with your heroes. But there's also this combo system that incorporates some decisions being made by the player and some decisions being made by the GM. Although I don't get to play too many RPGs, I'm always interested to see the little tweaks and changes and new innovations that come up. It looks like this one is offering a few, and also this one was already released in French, so it is a publication that they have already released, and that means that there's probably reviews out there for it as well if you want to check that out. But what I really like about this campaign is that they do have a free quick start PDF, so if you do want to go ahead and try it for yourself, you can go ahead and find that on their campaign. Also launching on the 16th, we have Snowcrest, which plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 15 to 60 minutes to play. And this one is a competitive game where each player is going to be managing their own hand of cards, but then also building out a tableau. Because on your turn, you have 3 different actions you can choose. You can either pay the cost to play a card from your hand or from the shared supply into your tableau, and then also activate the effects of that character, with each of the cards offering different effects that usually gain you some amount of resources or allow you to spend resources for other resources or actions, and they could also include other players as well, creating different opportunities that lots of players can jump in on. Some of these abilities might also allow you to spend resources to build different types of buildings, and then some of the abilities might also require you to spend buildings in order to gain their benefits. So in a way, the buildings do also act like a resource, but if you're able to build enough of them, you'll also get 2 different thresholds of victory points that you'll be able to earn at the end of the game. But the other action you can perform on your turn is to simply activate a face-up card that you already have in your tableau. And whenever you do that, you're going to do the exact same thing, take the ability of that card, and then flip the card face down. And the third action is an interesting one because you're actually forced to take it once you have 3 cards in a row that are all face down in any direction, including diagonally. So this might be a factor in deciding which cards you actually want to activate on your turn, because you may or may not want to be forced into taking that third action on your next turn, which is the rest action, which essentially allows you to flip all of your face down cards back up. But before you do that, you actually get to gain the resources depicted in the top right corner of any of your cards, which means that you might want to keep certain cards face up when you take the rest action so that you can get the resources from those cards. And having the right resources at the right time is a key aspect of winning this game, because the resources drive almost every action offered in this game. But the nice thing here is that if you don't have the appropriate resources to take a particular action that you want, you can always move the Omen token 1 space to the right in order to earn 1 resource of any type. The catch here is that as that Omen token moves more and more to the right, it's going to be costing you victory points for the end of the game, but there are some actions that do allow you to move that Omen token back to the left. But the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game, and the primary way that you increase your victory points is by getting a resource known as scrolls. And to get those, you're essentially taking your various actions and converting resources into other resources until you eventually convert those into scrolls. And like I said, you're going to be adding all of those up to see your total victory points and then subtracting any victory points from your omens. And then the player with the most at that point wins the game. And if you want to learn more about this one, I will have it linked in the description down below. Also on the 16th, we have another really interesting campaign, and this one is called the Gamelib Pocket. And this is essentially a box of components and rules for about 52 games that you can play with just those components. And this is really cool because it'll get you familiar with all sorts of games from all over the world, and it's also a campaign that's offered at whatever price that you want to pay. Of course, if you do jump into it, just keep in mind that this still does cost the creators money, and to at least try and pay something reasonable. But if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. Also launching on the 16th, we have One Hit Heroes, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes just 15 to 60 minutes to play. And this one is my own personal pick of the week. And yes, I know I already said that twice in this video, but Castles of Burgundy is a game that's already been released, and it was my pick of the week back when it was originally released. And then Mindbug's already had a few campaigns, and I think that's also been my pick of the week for each of those campaigns. So I just want to offer you something new here, and I think this one really does earn it. And I know a lot of other reviewers have had the chance to play this one, and they've only had good things to say. I really recommend checking out Michael's video from One Stop Co-op Shop. I think he does a really great job explaining the game and giving you an idea of how it plays. But this is a cooperative game where players are each going to be choosing their heroes that all have their unique deck of cards, and then you're going to be playing through different episodes that each take you through 4 different unique bosses. Players are going to have to defeat each boss in order to gain new cards to add into their deck, which essentially allows you to level up and get new tricks up your sleeve and get a little bit more powerful so that you can take out the next boss, hopefully being powerful enough so that you're able to do it without getting hit, because if you get hit even once in this game, you lose the game. And as funny as that sounds, it is unfortunately a bit of an exaggeration, because in this game, your gear kind of act like your health, because anytime that you might get hit in this game, you can instead choose to discard one of your pieces of gear to essentially negate that damage, but at the cost of losing that gear and whatever ability or effect it might have granted you. And you can only equip 2 pieces of gear at a time, but you might find other gear in your deck, or you might gain new gear as you play throughout the chapter. So even though you lose a piece of gear, there are ways that you can get them back. The turns in this game alternate between a player and then the enemy, and then another player and then the enemy, so on and so forth until either the players have completed the chapter or a player has been hit. Players are always going to have 5 cards in their hand, and on your turn you can play up to 3 of them. And what's cool about these cards is that they're going to have all sorts of different effects, but anytime that you manage to hit the enemy, you're going to be generating some amount of aggro, because each enemy is going to have a certain amount of hit points indicated by these different tokens. And in order to deteriorate these hit points, you're going to have to be dealing light attacks for the smaller tokens and then heavy attacks for the larger tokens. But anytime that you are able to take down the enemy's health, you're going to be taking the associated token and then putting it onto your aggro track here. This track's broken into a few different colors, and anytime that the enemy attacks the players, they're going to be rolling this attack die, and if it's a hit, all the players get hit no matter what. But if it's one of the colors, each player is going to be checking if their aggro is below that color, and if it is, then they don't get hit. But if it's at or above that color, then they will be getting hit, and they're going to have to discard a gear if they're able to, or else they lose the game. Other effects in play might also get triggered when a player reaches a certain color on their aggro track. For example, the enemy might have certain abilities that are associated with one of those colors, and anytime that a player hits that point in their aggro track, it's going to be triggering that ability. Luckily, players have all sorts of cards at their disposal, and each of the characters will feel and play a little bit different and have different specialties and weaknesses, but some of these cards can allow you to modify your aggro or even redistribute aggro amongst the players. Some cards can even be played in advance to block attacks if you think you're going to get hit, and of course there are cards that allow you to deal damage to the enemy, and also cards that allow you to equip new items. Each of the boss's actions are managed through their action deck, where every time it becomes the boss's turn, you're going to be resolving one of those cards, and the card that you activate is always going to be revealed on the turn before. But then there's also going to be a second card at the top of their action deck, where you're going to be able to see the back of the card, which is going to feature a single word that will give you a clue as to what that action might be. This allows the players to strategize more and have more meaningful decisions on their turn. But even with all that information, there's still going to be really high stakes here, since if you only get hit once, you lose the game. So I'm not surprised at the love this one's getting so far, but if you do want to check it out for yourself, I definitely recommend it, and you can find a link to the campaign in the description down below. And we've come full circle here because we're back at God of War, the board game, which I did mention at the start of this video, and I didn't realize this was launching this week until literally filming this video right now. But this is a game that plays 1 to 2 players and takes about 60 minutes to play, and this is based on the video game with the same name, and it's supposed to take place between the 2 most recent releases of this game, which was God of War and then God of War Ragnarok. And this is a cooperative dungeon crawler where players are going to be playing through different quests and then matching those with different bosses in order to create a unique permutation that blends in those 2 unique elements together to deliver the experience that you're going to have for that particular game. Players are going to be going up against all sorts of different creatures and gods and goddesses, with one of the players playing as Kratos and the other player playing as his son Atreus. They have very different fighting styles in the game, with Atreus being more focused on being nimble and and using a bow and arrow, whereas Kratos has his weapons and his rage. But an element of this game that I think is really interesting is that you will be able to upgrade each of your characters individually, but a big aspect of this game is upgrading the characters together, because both of these characters really riff off each other, and they're father and son, so they have quite a strong bond. And as you're building that bond throughout the game, you're going to be getting benefits to both your characters and earning different actions and combos and abilities that are going to take both of you in order to execute on. Unfortunately, that's all I know about this one so far. There's just not a lot of info out yet, but this will be launching very, very soon. So if you do want to check it out, I will have a link to the campaign in the description down below. Also launched on the 17th, we have Dwarves, The Fall of Karnarak, and this plays 1 to 5 players. It takes about 60 to 180 minutes to play. And unfortunately with this one, it's another one that I don't have a whole lot of info on, but this is a game where each player is going to be playing as their own unique clan of dwarf, and you're going to be working together in this cooperative experience to try and defend the citadel. Players are going to be using their actions on their board, but then also using worker placement out on the main board in order to heal themselves or forge new items that they'll be able to use to fight back against their enemy, with that enemy being a dwarf-eating dragon. But if you are able to defeat them, you win the game and you earn yourself a well-deserved beer. This is a game that does incorporate some amount of humor, which I do appreciate, but players are going to be gaining different cards in order to upgrade the citadel and upgrade the options that they have, and also to fight back against the dragon. I wish I had more on this one, but there's just not a lot of info on the finer details on the gameplay, but I did see a positive review on BoardGameGeek from someone that did actually play this game. Unfortunately, they also didn't say much about how it actually plays, but it is a little reassuring that at least what is there could be a lot of fun. So if you do want to see for yourself, I'm sure there'll be a lot more info on the campaign page once it actually launches, and I will have a link to that in the description down below. That's everything I have for you this week, but don't leave yet because we still got a few awesome giveaways to announce, and the first one we have is for a pledge for Power Vacuum, and this is a trick-taking game that has a few unique twists, because in this game, all the other players know exactly which suits you have in your hand, except not really, because one of the suits is actually a spy suit that disguises it as any other suit in the game, and the spy suit can actually even beat Trump, but only if a Trump card is actually played into the trick. And of course, the goal in this game is to try and win as many tricks as possible, either by playing the highest card in the lead suit, or by playing the highest trump card, or by playing the highest valued spy card if a trump card has been played. But another unique twist on this game is that there's something called the control board, and whatever player plays the lowest value card, they'll get to manipulate that board in various ways to try and get power from certain characters on that board to other characters on that board. The reason that they might want to do that is because every round in this game, players are going to be dealt an agenda card, and this is going to tell you which character on that board you want to see have the most power and which character you want to have the least. I really like this because it introduces a really fun push your luck element into the game, because if you don't reveal that card at all throughout the entirety of the round, then you have to fulfill both the conditions of that card in order to gain its points. But if you choose to reveal it at some point in the round, then you can actually earn the points individually if you happen to only get one of those conditions. The catch here is that the earlier that you do that, the more points that will be worth. So you'll want to decide that route as early as possible if that's the route you want to go, but it does come at the cost of all the other players knowing what you are trying to achieve. But if you're able to fulfill those objectives, that'll earn you some amount of points, but then you'll also be earning points for each of the tricks that you're able to win. Then you'll be able to spend those points in order to buy different parts of your statue, and the player that's able to build their statue first wins the game. I do also want to mention that this is coming from the same team that brought you the game Roll Camera, which is a cooperative game that I'm personally very interested in. And I really love what the team's doing here, because this is being offered on their campaign at a very reasonable price. And the shipping costs here are almost unbelievable compared to what I've been seeing with other campaigns lately. But what's even more crazy about this is that any add-ons that you add onto your pledge don't actually increase your shipping charge, because all add-ons ship free as long as you're also purchasing one of the other physical pledges offered in this campaign, which still is a fantastic deal, because the amount that you're saving on the shipping essentially covers the cost of that game. So even if this isn't a game that you're interested in, but you might be interested in Roll Camera, you're basically getting this game for free, considering that the shipping of Roll Camera would probably cost as much as that game. But I just thought that was really awesome and wanted to point it out, and it's also one of the reasons that I am currently a backer of this campaign. I'm only at $1 right now, but I do plan to go all in on the Roll Camera Pledge because it is a game that I've wanted for some time now. But the only thing better than buying a game is winning a game, and this giveaway is going to be for the Power Vacuum Superior Pledge, which comes with the core game and all the deluxe wooden upgrades. And to enter this giveaway, all you got to do is leave a comment down below, and the publishers were nice enough to offer this worldwide, so I don't really need any hashtag for this one. I'll just draw from all the comments. But all you got to do is let us know what your favorite appliance is. For myself, since I got my own house, I needed a vacuum, and I caved and ended up getting one of those Roombas. And it's really dumb, a lot dumber than I thought it would be, but it gets the job done, and it is pretty awesome that I can just go and clean different areas of the house while I use that time doing other things like researching or editing these videos. Good luck in the giveaway, and the next giveaway we have is for a pledge for We All Take From the River. And this is a game where each player is going to be drawing a different objective card at the start of the game, but then each player interacting with the board is going to have some sort of consequence in other areas of the board. Players are going to be harvesting fish or trees or different resources, and also building cities and houses, and also generating pollution that will all flow down the river. Luckily, some of those objectives also include cleaning up the pollution and maintaining a certain amount of fish in the river. This is a game that aims to show you how everything's interconnected and how an action in one location can have very different consequences somewhere else. This one's also going to be offered worldwide, so if you leave a comment down below, it's going to get you entered into Power Vacuum, but it'll also get you entered into this giveaway as well. Good luck in the giveaways, and we did just have one giveaway last week, and that was for Cosmos Empires, but we didn't run this on YouTube. Instead, we did this one on the Discord. And if you're watching this video early enough, there might still be time to enter it, and there's only 212 people entered on this giveaway so far, so if you do want to enter it, your odds are really good that you could win yourself a pledge for Cosmos Empires. If you haven't checked out the Discord yet, there is a link in the description below, and there's a lot of other exciting things to check out here, but at the very least, you can go ahead and win yourself a nice game here. And I know my notifications have been building up here. I've been trying to get caught up on all my emails and messages on all the different platforms. Hopefully I can get caught up on all of that this weekend, so if you are waiting for a message from me, I'm sorry, I will respond. I do always respond. It just sometimes takes me some time. And that's everything I have for you this week, and it's kind of funny that I already have Castles of Burgundy and I'm still super excited to check out the campaign. I don't know what's wrong with me. But I hope there's something there that caught your interest as well. This is a bigger week than usual. I'm not sure if it's going to continue like this. I think it usually starts to die off as we get into the summer, but we still do got a couple months before we get to that. So definitely lots more to come because I already have 11 games lined up for next week's episode, and I usually find a bunch more in the week itself, but we'll save that until then. So as always, thanks so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. And until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.
What?